Sure, it's just one preseason game, but Brian Gutekunst might have done it again. In one offseason, took a position of enormous need and turned it into a strength.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to the podcast to iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever you find podcasts, you will find Locked On Packers, the number one Packers podcast on the internet, and the show for fans who know what happened. They want to know why and how. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. We have seen Brian Gutekunst do this before. And when you look around the NFL, what you often see are NFL teams who, at a position of need, they go out and they spend big money in free agency to fill that void. And then maybe they'll go out and they'll sprinkle a little third-round pick here, and they call it good. And inevitably, over the course of the season, that doesn't work. Because free agents have about a 50% hit rate. And in the first 3 rounds, draft picks, if you're lucky, they've got about a 50% hit rate. Depending on the position, the NFL is actually better at doing this with some positions than they are at other positions. And when the Packers have a problem, that is not how Brian Gutekunst handles this. This is something we have talked about every draft season here on Locked On Packers, because he just is going to throw assets at the problem. Now, it helps that in nearly every year that Brian Gutekunst has been a general manager, this has been a pretty good team overall. Now, that is in part because Brian Gutekunst has put the roster together. Nearly every player on this team is there because of Brian Gutekunst, and the scant few players like Kenny Clark who aren't have been extended by Brian Gutekunst. But in nearly every offseason, the Packers have said, here is a position of weakness. Here's a bunch of stuff that we're going to try. Whether it's a position change or it's multiple draft picks, 3, 4 guys that you bring in the offseason. In 2019, they go out in free agency, Za'Darius and Preston Smith, in addition to Rashawn Gary in the first round. It's Adrian Amos and Darnell Savage. It's Evan Williams, Javon Bullard, Keaton Oladapo, and Xavier McKinney. And that's what I want to talk about to open today's show. The safety position. And I was struck because I was talking to some media friends of mine, and I was saying, Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney, it's the best safety duo since when? And the answer might be like Leroy Butler and Eugene Robinson in the mid-90s. That's how long it's been. Darnell Savage and Adrian Amos for like half of the 2020 season. And then the flashes that we saw from Darnell Savage in 2019. Other than that, like, they won the Super Bowl. You had Nick Collins, but then, you didn't, Morgan Burnett was not there yet. And then Morgan Burnett shows up and you lose Nick Collins. That had the potential to be the answer. You had to go into Super Bowl with Charlie Pepra. So this has been a long time that the Packers have been trying to figure this out. They've had a quality safety here or there, but remember, this is a team that had to put Tramon Williams at safety not that long ago. 6 years ago, but Jamal Williams has been out of the NFL for 4 or 5 years, right? So it was a pretty dire situation. And then they threw assets at it. Long term, that didn't work out, but now you're back again. And look, I understand it's one game, but Javon Bullard was the perfect fit for this team when they took him in the second round. It was why I would tell anyone who would listen that I thought the Packers were going to draft him. He was, I believe, in our perfect draft series. If he wasn't, he was in the one that I wrote for The Leap where I predicted who the Packers were going to take. And I thought he was in play in the first round for the Packers. The fact that they got him, not just in the second round, but then with the second round pick, is going to end up looking crazy in a couple years because he is going to be a really, really good football player. His ability to cover in the slot, to play anywhere else in the back end that you want him to be. His best plays on Saturday were as a nickel or a box overhang safety. I don't think he's a deep middle, deep half guy with any regularity. You want him, which is why I want him to be the full-time nickel on this team. But that is just a tandem point because you paid top dollar for Xavier McKinney, a guy who at 24 years old, players that good and that young do not hit the open market. But the Giants felt like they were in a rock and a hard place with their contract situations. They got to pay Andrew Thomas. They, for some reason, decided they're going to pay Daniel Jones. And even when the owner, we saw in Hard Knocks, desperately wanted to pay the running back for reasons just, oh my God, like why? They decided they couldn't stomach it. And a young player at a much more valuable position, they just let walk because they were like, well, we could probably give him 14, 15, but 17 is a bridge too far, which is absurd. Like you can manufacture the couple extra $1 million if you need to. I think the reality was they didn't think for their team he was worth the money. And I think we are going to see very quickly that just ends up being a boon for the Packers. And Evan Williams, I don't want to say I was wrong because I did not have a fully formed opinion of Evan Williams when they drafted him. I had not watched a lot of Evan Williams when they drafted him. But by the consensus, he was a reach. History tells us that is a dangerous game to play. Now, look, it's football dangerous. It's NFL draft dangerous. It's not actually dangerous. But when we evaluate the process, that's the truth. Now, Jim Nagy was on the show from the Senior Bowl saying he had people in the league saying in the 4th round, we were targeting him there. And the Packers, they felt like they had to move up to get him and they got their guy. And by golly, it looks like they got their guy. Like he looks like someone who, even if he's not, a superstar player, that he can just come in and be a solid guy for you when and where you need him to be. Is he going to be a standout post safety? No. I don't think so, but maybe. But is he someone who can be that secondary safety, who can play in the box, who can play in the slot if you need him to, who can rush the passer a little bit if you want to send him on blitzes when he's in the box? He's a very reliable tackler. We saw that in just one game, but he's been making plays all over camp. And you can see the way that he thinks the game. Great play early on. It's slant flat. And he sees from the outside, he sees the receiver breaking in. And before the quarterback even looks to the running back, he knows what the look is and he knows where the ball is going to go because he knows he's in the window. Can't throw the slant, which means you have to throw the flat. Quarterback's eyes are on the receiver, but Evan Williams knows he can't throw it. He can't throw it here. So he breaks to the running back. Ball goes to the running back before the quarterback even knows he's going to throw it to the running back. Evan Williams sees it. That's the level of play where you can think the game at that level. When you can know what the quarterback is going to do before he does it. That is high level football. And he just, when you listen to him talk about the game, it is hard not to be impressed. with what he's capable of doing. And they got to prove it in real games. But this has a chance to be the most talented safety room the Packers have had in a really, really long time. And it is a credit to the process that Brian Gutekunst goes through basically every offseason when there's an issue. I mean, he did it with receiver 2 years in a row, and it worked twice. Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs. They're good. They're NFL starting caliber receivers. And then the next year, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Grant Dubose. Grant Dubose looks great. They all are NFL players. But you only needed like 3 of them to be NFL players. They're all NFL players, but that's the beauty of the methodology is if you hit on all of them, it's home run city. But you only have to do the baseball thing. You only have to bat 300. And if you draft 6 guys and wind up with 2 good players, that's 2 good players that you didn't have before. And that's kind of what happened at corner. Like he drafted a bunch of them, Josh Jackson, Jair Alexander. That didn't work out great, but Ja's an incredible football player. So this approach is paying dividends once again for the Green Bay Packers, which is just a validation of their process. Now I want to talk about a couple different positions where we're trying to figure out rotations, fringe guys, who's in the mix there, and relate it to what we saw on Saturday. We're going to do that next on Locked On Packers. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at LinkedIn. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find qualified professionals that are right for the role. So LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you find and hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks for making Locked On Packers your first listen every day. For your second listen, go check out Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insight on the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. A couple positions where we're trying to figure out how this is all going to shake out. Offensive line, one of them. This has been something we've been tracking, we've been monitoring all through camp. Jordan Morgan does not play because he's got the shoulder injury. By the way, if you missed our live show, go back and listen to it. It was up on Saturday. It should be in your podcast feed. And we had a lot of fun after the game. We'll be live again this week after the game. The offensive line, Sean Rhyan, played 2 different positions, started at right guard on the first team, then played center with Sean Clifford and acquitted himself nicely at both positions. He is a dude in the run game. He brings a nasty, he brings a physicality. We saw him on the move, pulling around the corner with Emmanuel Wilson and just like a bowling ball of butcher knives. And that's what you want to see. If you're not going to be a finished product, and he's not, have a skill where you can go, this is what I'm really good at. And I did not think it was going to be being a nasty run blocker, but right now that's what it is. And we're trying to figure out, okay, where is he going to slot in then? If Jordan Morgan is your starting right guard, then maybe it is the case that Sean Rhyan is just your starting swing interior lineman. And maybe he pushes Josh Myers. Maybe Josh Myers gets hurt and you have someone that you feel really comfortable in. Jacob Monk, I thought, also acquitted himself nicely, the rookie from Duke at center. And so you have a nice interior rotation if you have a problem. The question is, who is your backup offensive tackle? Andre Dillard played for Zach Tom in this game. He wasn't bad. So maybe you're good there. I wonder if Jordan Morgan is ultimately your swing tackle, where you say, okay, Sean Rhyan, you're the right guard. Jordan Morgan, you kick out to right tackle. Would it be the same at left tackle if there's an injury to Rasheed Walker? Jason Hirschhorn, our pal over at The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to, and America's Guest, suggested that maybe it's the case that Elton Jenkins is the backup left tackle and Jordan Morgan is the backup right tackle. Makes sense. Keep him on the same side. You keep that same side continuity. Sean Ryan has played on the right. You could play him on the left if you wanted to. And so, I think that makes a lot of sense to keep that same side continuity. This receiver battle is, I think, going to come down to the final week of camp. Grant Dubose is an NFL receiver. He has the draft pedigree. And he said, look, I'm way ahead of myself last year this time because he was hurt. This is the problem with Edgerrin Cooper. If you want Edgerrin Cooper to be the day one nickel, he has to get healthy. He has to get healthy. The day one nickel linebacker, I mean. He has to get healthy. He has to be out there because, especially at linebacker, this time is money, baby. Like, you have to be out there to get these reps because the missed time, it compounds exponentially. It becomes really deleterious to your ability to go out and play if you're missing these early reps where you are putting, sort of metaphorical pen to paper on this, where you're seeing it on the whiteboard, you're seeing it in practice and walkthroughs, but then on the field, can you put that same mental rep into a game rep when you don't know that it's coming, when you see a different color jersey across from you, when the fans are out there, when the lights are bright and the game is actually on the line? That's a difficult thing to transition into doing. So you have Bo Melton has a nightmare day, a couple drops. Grant Dubose lights it up. Malik Heath makes a couple nice plays. And I think the question that we're asking right now is, did Bo Melton do enough last year to create a big enough gap, cushion, to allow Dubose to sneak on this team? And then do you need to also keep Malik Heath on this team? Like Samori Toure, congratulations, you are a Minnesota Viking or a Detroit Lion or a Chicago Bear or a Dallas Cowboy or a San Francisco 49er. Like he is not going to be on this team unless it's on the practice squad. So you have your core four guys. Who's next and how many? I could see the Packers keeping 7. And there are a couple reasons for that, special teams being one of them. I think it depends on what the cornerback situation looks like. If Javon Bullard can play the nickel and Xavier McKinney can play the nickel, do they go short at corner so that they can pick up an extra receiver? That's not crazy, especially if you think you can sneak Kalen King onto your practice squad. Now, I would be dubious of that. I know he fell to the 7th round, but the pedigree is there. He made a couple nice plays against the Browns. I wonder about that. Robert Rochelle, I really liked what I saw from Robert Rochelle. And I even tweeted about it during the game. Like, I'm not normally, out here getting Twitter fingers over cornerback 6 or 7 on your roster, but I really liked the pickup when they made it. I didn't understand why the Rams didn't just hold on to him. He's a guy who I have no doubt can be a special teams contributor. As a gunner, he is the perfect profile for a gunner. Corner, really fast, really athletic, plays with an edge. Like that's what you want as a gunner. And then the other side, like he can be one of the guys who blocks the gunners. He can be on kick coverage. And that's in addition to being just like a solid backup corner. If he's going to start for you, he's probably going to get picked on. Like there's a reason he's not a starting corner in the NFL. But did I think he acquitted himself nicely in this game against backups? Yeah, against, by the way, pretty good backup quarterbacks. I think that matters. Like we have to say it is different if you as a corner played well in a situation where you're going, I don't know where the ball's going, versus when you're playing with Jameis Winston and Pro Bowler, Tyler Huntley and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. Those are real NFL quarterbacks. They're backups, but they're good NFL backups. It's about as good a test as you're going to get, and I thought Robert Rochelle played well. So, what if he has to be on? Is that going to take a receiver off? Can one of the receivers do the things that he can do on special teams? because that's what this is ultimately going to come down to. And then quickly, just this last thing. I thought Michael Pratt pretty obviously outplayed Sean Clifford. The Packers don't seem to view them on equal footing at this point. Matt LaFleur seemed to, he hinted that, Sean Clifford is ahead and would clearly play more. The starters are not going to play this week. So that's more opportunities for guys like Michael Pratt and Sean Clifford. And that means there's some more pressure on some of those guys. We are going to talk about the pressure guys to close today's show. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thank you for making Locked On Packers your first listen today. Now go listen to Locked On Fantasy Football. Get daily insights on the best fantasy draft strategies so you can win your league this season. You can also find the link to Locked On Fantasy Football in the description of this podcast, so you don't need to search. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every game that is played, the pressure mounts for some players. And I think for someone like Samori Toure, who I mentioned, it's just over. Just asked and answered. Like, it's over for him. But you are Caleb Jones. You were a 2022 draft class player. It's now year 3. What are you showing? What are you showing? Are you better than Kadeem Telfort? Are you better than Luke Tenuta? Do you deserve a place over Travis Glover, who is just a draft pick? I'm not saying he doesn't, but I'm saying the Packers have some other options there, and they're trying to figure out this same question that I am about who is going to be this backup offensive tackle. They signed Andre Dillard to do it, and they have the options with Elton Jenkins and Jordan Morgan able to do that if they need to. I do think if it's a one-game thing versus a long-term thing, that might affect the way that the Packers look at this. They like Caleb Jones. I like Caleb Jones. I want to see more from Caleb Jones because I think the ability is there. I think there's pressure on him to show he is the guy because Kadeem Telfort, for example, one less year. So the Packers can convince themselves, hey, the runway is different for this guy. Hey, Travis Glover, we just drafted him. The runway is different for this guy. We want to see Caleb Jones clearly better than those guys. Is that happening right now? You got to go out and show it. I mentioned in the battle that no one asked for, no one knew was happening. Ben Sims has got to show it. Had the bad drop on Family Night. I don't want to overrate Family Night just because we all got to see it. But I think the Packers, just even subconsciously, you have to rate that a little bit higher than just the average Tuesday practice. Joel Wilson, my guy, showed well. Did some nice things in the blocking game. Was nimble as a receiver. I've never been as impressed with Ben Sims as I wanted to be. I liked the physical profile, and that is usually enough for me to go, hey, with a tight end, let's just see what it looks like. The Packers like Tyler Davis. They're paying for Tyler Davis. He's apparently having a nice camp. But I think they're going to keep 4 tight ends. And so if that's the case, then this is a battle between Ben Sims and Joel Wilson. And I think right now Ben Sims is losing it. This is going to seem unfair. And I understand it. But there is pressure on Marshawn Lloyd. Not to go steal a starting job. There's pressure on him to get healthy. The Packers invested meaningful draft capital into him. A.J. Dillon, as I said, did not play well. Was it great blocking? No. But did Emmanuel Wilson a couple of times slither and wedge himself between two blockers and just sort of drive the pile forward for a couple yards and fall forward to get 4 yards when it could have just been, 1 or none? Yes. Do I want to see A.J. Dillon do that? Am I going to hold my breath to see it more? I'm not. If they want some pop out of this running game, it is probably coming from Marshawn Lloyd. He has to get healthy. Now, that's not fair to him. Like, this is not me saying to Ben Sims, hey, you got to play better because there's this other guy coming for your job. There isn't anyone coming for Marshawn Lloyd's job, but there is pressure on him to be a meaningful part of this run game because the Packers need his home run hitting ability in this offense to be maximally devastating, which they can be. I think that's real. I think the same is true for Edgerrin Cooper and Tyron Hopper. You have to get on the field. You have to get on the field. And let me add Keaton Oladapo, who's also got a late start to camp. Anthony Johnson Jr. played really well, I thought, in the game. Now, if Oladapo's going to be more like a dime linebacker, maybe they don't play the same position. But for as much fun as we had talking about Evan Williams and Javon Bullard and Xavier McKinney, don't miss Anthony Johnson Jr., who I thought played really well, played with force, took on a pulling guard like he was nothing, combined in on that forced fumble with Evan Williams. I like Anthony Johnson Jr. I've liked him since college. Remember, this is really only his third year playing safety. He was a corner at Iowa State before converting to safety his last year. So this is still something that he's learning. You got to see Keaton Oladapo on the field. And this is building on the point that I made after the game. There is mounting pressure on Keyshawn Nixon because of not just Javon Bullard, who I think can play that spot and would just be the better player in that nickel. But I liked what I saw from Kalen King in the nickel as well. And I think he can play either boundary or nickel. So he was someone who, if you had an injury, and in this case, he would be a couple injuries, right? He could play on the boundary. And then if you needed him to kick inside in the nickel, I'm trying to imagine what that circumstance would be like, but that sort of versatility has value to the coaches as well. So I think there is mounting pressure on Keyshawn Nixon to produce because with every tackle that Javon Bullard comes down and makes with force and every play Evan Williams makes, it's going to be harder to keep both of those guys off the field. And you're not taking Xavier McKinney off the field. So that means there's only one guy. Keyshawn Nixon's going to have to make some plays. Maybe he's going to have to make some plays in the return game. I don't want to see him at outside corner anymore. I speculated on our live show that was because the Packers see a path where he's not the starting nickel anymore, and you'd like to have some positional versatility with him. Like it was different when you had Stokes and Valentine and Jair and Russell Douglas, and he was a nickel only and your kick returner. That was fun. Now you don't have the same sort of depth, but you do have some guys who could play the nickel. You don't have the same boundary corner depth. Okay, maybe that's why he's got to be out there. But you feel really good about Eric Stokes. I thought Eric Stokes played pretty well. You're going to need him to play with force in the run game. He did. Came up, took on blocks. I like that from Eric Stokes. This is a guy who looks like he's moving like himself again. That was what I wanted to see, and we saw it. All right, much more to come this week as we get set for week 2 of the preseason. More interviews coming your way, a lot more fun stuff as we get you ready for the Packers in 2024. Follow me on Twitter, Peter_Bukowski. Follow the podcast on Twitter, Locked On Packers. Like us wherever you get podcasts, Spotify. You know the places. Plus on the social medias, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, so you can stay locked on Packers.